You're listening to the Listen Up Show, Startup Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Mitchell Chadro, your host. Today on Show 027. Today, we're here with Joshua Davidson. So what we're actually going to learn about today is people use and need apps. They use them to balance their business, their family, their life. Joshua's actually a web app developer. He's the founder of Chop Dawg. How he actually helps startups, business owners. He founded Chop Dawg in 2009 when he was just 16 years old. Thank you so much for joining me on another Listen Up show and the Mitchell Chadro podcast. Now enjoy the show. Let's welcome Joshua Davidson. Joshua, how you doing?
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's awesome. Joshua, I kind of think, what was I doing at 16? I mean, I was working for a marketing research company, but I never thought to actually start a marketing research company. So that's pretty awesome that you actually started this company when you were 16.
So, it's in hindsight, I think it makes even more sense than in the moment. So, in perspective, back in 2009, remember that was like the height of the recession. In fact, if you look in August of 2009 when I started the company, it was the worst that are like all the markets, the Dow Jones, S&P 500 was like, it was at that lowest of the low. So what happened was where I grew up is anyone that would hire a traditional 16-year-old job was taken up by people who are way overqualified because they got let go of jobs from companies that closed and shut down. And I grew up in the Jersey Shore, which depended on Atlantic City's economy. And if you look it up, how many casinos closed and laid off during that time, it was crazy. So what happened was, I kind of was forced to be an entrepreneur, but in reality was, I wasn't even thinking I was becoming an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what the true definition of the term was. In fact, I probably couldn't even pronounce it when I started, right? Like, that's just how novice I was. So it was also a little bit of, I think it was just naturally in my blood. And, because I didn't have any naive or, I guess society construct tell me otherwise, it was just always a natural fit for me. Plus years before that, I already built websites, sold a couple. I made money online, built fan communities. I was building my own thing. So I feel it was literally the natural progression to pretty much my early childhood to what I'm doing now.
Let me give you your due because I was going to give you a little bit of a longer intro there, but I'm glad that you kind of told us a little bit about what you were doing at 16 and 17, and we're going to get into all of that. You know, you're 23 now. The company provides entrepreneurs who are mostly non-technical. They don't necessarily all come with technical backgrounds, and they actually need someone with your technical skill and know-how to help them develop these web apps. So, you know, I was looking on your website. You have over 150 startup clients, and if I were to actually interview these clients, Joshua, they would all tell me that Joshua is the go-to source for turning their web app ideas into actual products. So, you know, what else we're going to learn here? You know, how does he do it? He does web development, mobile development, user interface, branding. Now, Joshua, we have trusted friends in our audience that are actually listening up right now, and a lot of them are, in fact, non-technical entrepreneurs who have great ideas that may need crowdsourcing or outsourcing, or they need to just hire somebody like you and your company, Chop Dawg, and founders such as yourself. So our listeners want help turning their validated ideas into reality. Are you ready to speak up?
Let's make it happen.
All right. Hey, that sounds great. You know, I was really hoping, Joshua, that you were actually going to respond that way. So let's just jump right into your personal story. I know you started taking us through a little bit of that personal story, you know, as you kind of got started at 16. But we want people to know who Joshua is, obviously. Tell us a little bit more about your background, about how it actually ties into actually how you're helping people today.
Yeah, as I don't know if you can hear, I'm being attacked right now by a 9-week-old bulldog.
Hey, man, I love animals. We were talking about that a little bit before, and you know, it's all a matter of balancing between, you know, your family, which are your pets, your kids if you have them, your business, you know. So that's really cool that you have a new dog.
Yeah, she's currently looking me right in the eyes, asking why am I not playing with her right now.
Very cool. Very cool indeed.
So, again, in perspective, back in 2009, the Apple App Store was about a year old. For context, for those who can remember back then, which it's crazy to think how long ago it is now, like Super Monkey Ball and I Am T-Pain were the two most successful apps on the App Store. And Tap Tap Revenge. So that kind of puts a little context there for how old and premature the App Store really was. But yeah, really the idea came about for this company through my own problem, which is how I recommend all the entrepreneurs I work with what they do. Pretty much, you can either call me the most technical, non-technical person on the face of the earth, or the most non-technical, technical person. Whichever way you go about it, is probably the right answer. So I knew enough growing up how to program not basic websites, slightly more than basic, but nothing complex to the products we're even building at our own company. And honestly, I'm almost like that, my 9-week-old English bulldog right now, where I was probably too stubborn to go and keep teaching myself more. It's a, very crappy mindset to have, but, the reality is just, I just knew my passion was more or less launching products and building and getting users and watching the impact, and it was the actual intimacy of building it. So I think that's where it stemmed from, my lack of enthusiasm and continuing to learn how to program further and that sort of thing. But one of my talents, my assets was I knew early on, I knew how to build things that people actually cared about and brands that people wanted to pay attention to and solve real problems that would make an impact. And, I was making money just at 14, 15, 16 years old in advertisements and stuff like that. So I knew where the power of the internet was going, and I knew the second mobile came out, this is the modern day industrial revolution. And there's a lot of people who are going to miss out on this opportunity that doesn't even happen once a generation. It happens like once every 2 generations. So because of that, I was like, I'm not going to lose this chance. So started Chop Dawg under my own actual context, which is I thought there had to be a company that could help take a great idea and make it become a reality if you have a great idea already. And I knew, understanding the marketplace, that, there's development firms here in the country, here in the United States. So I'm assuming most of your listeners are here in the States. But the reality is, if you can afford them and they're a quality firm, which they do exist, they're going to charge you a second mortgage. Number one, back in 2009, people were not dropping second mortgages. It's obviously the mortgage crisis happened, so it's a direct example. But 2, even today, how many individuals do you know dropping $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to go build an app? Probably no one listening to this podcast, right?
Correct. And no, they're looking for good resources. They're looking to leverage and establish good relationships with people like you.
Yep. No worries. It's like, the idea was, hey, by building this, by creating this company, how can we do it at a price point that's actually going to be more worthwhile? Then at the same point, what happened was I kind of realized early on that you need more than just a company to help build your company, right? You need more than just someone to help build your product. You also need a talented team to actually educate you on how do you actually build a product? How do you actually make something that people are going to want to use? How do you actually do something that is going to make you money? And the issue with these firms that are charging a second mortgage is, even though they're great quality firms for doing what they're producing, what they suck at is actually teaching you to become an entrepreneur and how to run your company. And that's where the issue is. And by realizing that, it was then and there that it came to, all right, there also needs to be a better way to help these people out. And then vice versa, the third thing was, if you couldn't afford a second mortgage, which is most entrepreneurs, they would go overseas. They'll work with teams in India and Pakistan and China. And, it's pretty much what I can say here is, it's almost like an M. Night Shyamalan plot. If we want to drop a Philly reference here. You're not sure what you're going to get.
Sure.
I'm not saying there aren't success stories, but you're more than likely to have failure than you are success stories, from bad teams to poor communication to, the crappiest code on the planet. If you think of the scenario, odds are that's what happens, right? So by all of that, we realized, oh my God, this is a goldmine opportunity, a major impact opportunity. It lets me do what I'm most passionate about, building things and helping them build initial traction and generate revenue, make an impact. And it's solving a problem that related exactly to me. So long story short, that's really how Chop Dawg became Chop Dawg that it is today. And at the time, we were actually focused primarily on web, but ended up that we did web, we do mobile. We're experimenting now in virtual reality, in wearable. We're all over the map. And it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah. So let me take you back to 2009. You're a young kid. You're 16 years old. You come up with this great idea. Hey, I want to start this company.
And don't forget the Phillies were still good.
Hey man, I remember. Hey, listen, I remember the 1980 Phillies. Okay, so you got the 1980, the 1983 Phillies. So yeah, so it's all good. And actually, most recently, but we'll see what kind of season they have next year. So you're 16, it's 2009, you say, I have this great idea, my clients are going to have some pain. I want to solve their problem. I want to sort of build a team to help me with this. How do you sort of begin to, execute on your vision? How do you go about that? Because we have a lot of clients out there, a lot of entrepreneurs who are listening to us who have these great ideas, but they don't know how to get started. So how did you start to build that momentum and start to execute on your idea?
So number one, I just started. So this is something I've been very vocal about in recent months, and writing a book on it, which is understanding emotional intelligence as an entrepreneur. And most people who claim to be entrepreneurs don't start because they have a fear. And if you really go down to that fear is not that they don't think they're going to be a success story. It's that they don't think they can work hard enough to be successful. That they don't believe truly deep down they have what it takes. And it's really interesting when you start talking to people and breaking down these barriers to what they feel is, I'm just afraid I'm going to lose my family or friends or lose my livelihood. And you really get down to it that they're afraid of themselves and disappointing themselves and their own ego. That you realize that a lot of people just naturally, that's the way I describe it, naturally aren't insane enough to become an entrepreneur. And that's actually my mindset is you have to be a special type of crazy to become an entrepreneur because you're going into a path that you depend 100% yourself. Every minute's battles, it's survival mode that you have to be selfless in order to be selfish, right? Like if the second you're selfish to be selfish, you're going to fail as an entrepreneur. And it's inherently difficult, and there's a reason why more people fail as entrepreneurs than succeed. And it's not just because they, probably the best example I can give you here is I have 800 entrepreneurs that personally reach out to me a year. I'm going to say about 600 of them are pretty good ideas, like ideas that can at least generate $1 million in revenue a year. There's obviously upper echelon ideas that I hear. I'm like, holy crap, you can be at 200, 300, 500, $1 billion evaluation. But even just $1 million business, it's not sexy right now because people want to become the next Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. But if you have a business where it's only 2-3 people running the company and you're making that much revenue, I don't think people are going to be complaining, right? Because your take home is going to be extraordinary more than the average American still is. It's just it's not sexy. It's not talked about. So I feel the fear is people have this unwarped perspective of what the definition of success is right now. And then the second thing is they have a layer about them that's just like, they basically don't trust themselves. They're just too afraid to admit it. So the first thing you got to do is you have to be willing to just go and do it, which that means congratulations, you got part of the crazy bug. You're part of a special fraternity. And then the second thing you got to do is, and I actually just wrote a blog post about this, I haven't shared it yet. You have to treat yourself almost like a professional athlete. So I talk to people all the time, why are athletes so successful? They're not just talented, but they're practicing. When they're not practicing, they're in the weight room. They're trying to get stronger, leaner, faster. When they're not in the weight room, they're reading books, trying to become more intelligent. Or they're not trying to read books and become more intelligent. They're listening to their coaches, keep criticizing how to improve their game. They're watching tape. They live, eat, and breathe everything they're doing to become better at what they do. Entrepreneurs, the best ones I've ever met, the ones that try to emulate myself and understand just the emotional intelligence aspect of it, are doing the same thing. They aren't just like going in and doing something. They're picking the brains of those who have done it. They're reading books on the subject matter. They're trying to become better salespeople, better open-minded, better communicators, better leaders. They're not only trying to solve problems, they're trying to look at the problem from every angle, from every aspect.
So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because people are going to learn a whole lot from you. And so when we had our last guest on, John Richards, he actually continued to talk about pivoting and how it's so important to fail faster, where in the first 30 or 60 days of a business, people want to fail faster, meaning that they want to fail sooner than later so that they can get it out of the way so that they can continue on. So if you actually were to look back on what you've been able to accomplish, what would you have done differently, whether it be to pivot differently, to try different things in those 30 to 60 days that you can sort of impart onto the people that are listening in the audience so that they can sort of learn from your own experiences?
So I'm going to give you actually two answers. One is my ego was my worst enemy probably the first 3-4 years of my business. And it's my own damn fault. What happened when word caught on that a successful business is being run by a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, the media eats that up. And all of a sudden you're being invited for news stories, for media, and it's great for business. In fact, I leveraged it early on. Like, I'm going to leverage being the boy wonder in order to turn that into revenue. And, newspapers will call you that smart Zuckerberg, things like that. But the reality about that is that gets to your head I think it's anyone's head. But imagine being an 18-year-old kid when you're supposed to be the most impressionable and when you're supposed to be like still learning and realizing you're not the center of the earth, being treated like the center of the earth. That probably set me back, I'm going to say, even though it sounds weird to say this, 10 years to where I should be right now. Fortunately, I'm aware about it now, but if I didn't have that beginning, I probably would have been forced to work even harder and smarter and stronger earlier on and probably be having dividends right now today.
So there's people out there that are wanting to start a business, an LLC, an S corporation, a C corporation, or even a nonprofit. If you actually head on over to mitchellchadro.com/ that's Inc. INC, you could actually start your company today. What are those things that you would have done differently that people can obviously implement right now? You got people that are on the fence, that are in a career that maybe want to start up. What do they do how do those first 30 days look to them?
So first 30 days, you should be just getting a product or service out the door. I mean, that's what the first 30 days is. You don't exist the first 30 days. So make yourself exist. Once you exist, what I would say is the first time you make money doesn't mean you made it. The first time you have a customer doesn't mean you make it. The first time you have a repeat customer doesn't even make it. You need to get yourself to the point where you have customers knocking on your door because you're producing results and those results are translating to more opportunities. Not because you're marketing, not because you're going door to door. You need to build a self-obtaining business model, which means that you need a business that's going to bring you revenue without you doing anything. So for example, the first 6 years of my company here, we would go out of our way and cold email and cold call and reach out just to find opportunities to do work. That's not a sustaining model, right? Now we're at the point where I'm very lucky. We're getting 20, 30 people a week reaching out to us at our company looking to hire us. That's an incredible difference, right? And we're now not applying our energy into finding work. We're applying our energy into building our company and making it stronger because we have that opportunity. So really, that's where you need your mindset to be. And then the second thing I brought up before that is important is you need to learn to sell to only those who want to be sold to. So a lot of early entrepreneurs, the biggest mistake they do early on is they try selling to an audience who really is really not a problem that they give a shit about, or they're willing to spend money at the money you think you want to spend about, right? And They end up, this is what happens why most companies fail is they're trying to solve a problem through something that's really not a big pain point that people are willing to put their money in. And that's a big deal. And you need to learn early on, as did we, that you need to solve a problem that people are willing to pay money for and then pay money enough that with the right volume, you're going to have an income. Because what often happens is you're going to sell something, 1,000 things, but you're making 99 cents. You might not be feeling as comfortable as if you sold to 1,000 customers being paid 100 grand. You're going to be significantly more comfortable. So you also need to find the right opportunity.
So what were some of those early mistakes in sales revenue early on that people can avoid in terms of creating those sales opportunities, that revenue generating? We interviewed Michael Hallahan and Bonnie Harvey, who actually sold Barefoot Wine to E.J. Gallo, and they talked about how the most important thing was creating sales, distributions, and revenue. A lot of other things could be delegated, but how do you generate that business? You have, over 150, 200 clients? How did you, how do you develop those clients? Looking back, what are some of the things that you would have done differently to sort of generate better sales, faster, smarter?
So I'm going to start with the second answer then to the first. How do you generate more sales? It's really simple. Because we're selling to those who want to be sold to, if I'm competing, I'm going to win that. Because I know firsthand that I can actually solve their problem. I don't actually have to sell them anymore. I just have to educate them on why we're the best. I got to educate them about why we have a better team, why we have the best customer support, why we produce results, and talk about the results and talk about their pain points and that we have solutions to their pain points. The issue is early on, what we did wrong is you try to sell them, why should you build a mobile app? If you're trying to do that, you've already lost. You're going to play a game where if you get 1% conversion, it's good. If I'm playing a game where you already know you need an app, you reach out to me because you're interested in seeing what we're about, now I can get an 80, 90% conversion rate because I just know your needs. So that's number one, right? And then going to second, how do you make it so you have a viable business model? Most people focus on the wrong thing first, which is marketing. So to me, that's BS. To me, the first thing you focus on is results. Get customers, make them happy. Make them happier than they've ever been before in their entire life. Because if you do that, they're going to tell two people. And then those two people Make them happier than they've ever been before in their entire life. You do that, they're going to tell 2 people. And then they're going to tell 2 people. And then they're going to tell 2 people. And it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It might start small, but it's going to build up incredibly quick. Incredibly. And that is such an asset right there to make that happen. And this is, again, something that most entrepreneurs fail to see, is that deliverables is a lot stronger, a lot more powerful than marketing is going to be. Now, if you use marketing to push the results you have done, the deliveries you have done, you're going to be in a good position. Now you have something that's actually going to put you in a position to succeed and be much more sustainable for the long term.
Our fast pitch, mitchellchadro.com/books for books, audio books, guest recommendations, and the books that I read to start up each day. Sponsors our Fast Pitch, my book club recommendations, back at mitchellchadro.com/books. To see more of my recommendations and recommendations of our guests, just go to mitchellchadro.com/books. It's your #1 resource for book reviews and recommendations. You know, you talked a little bit about deliverables. You talked a little bit about when these startups have fear. What do you think are some other most common mistakes that other startups or entrepreneurs or students out there who are interested in getting into business make that actually delays or prevents their success? Because you also alluded, you alluded to success, and obviously that means something different to each person, but that's actually preventing them from getting there.
So the first answer I'm going to give you here is cash flow, or just spending cash stupidly. So again, I just wrote this blog post today, so it's always fun to get to talk about subject matters like this. I see a lot of companies spend money foolishly because they spend at the wrong time. For example, a lot of our clients spend on legal before they even start breaking ground on their product. And I'm like, if you're 10 months out, why are you spending that money? Why are you going to create terms of service if your product may change? Why do you need a copyright agreement right now? Does your company need to register this minute? You have much more important things to do, like focusing on building the actual company that it would be on. So that's like prioritizing, or like the monthly subscriptions where I'll sign up for this $10 subscription, $20 a month subscription, $30 a month subscription. And next thing you know, you're spending $6,000 to $12,000 a year, right? $500 to $1,000 a month. That adds up. So it's like a lot of people reprioritize the wrong things. And that really just comes down to, again, I'm talking about the emotional intelligence layer here, which is you should really only focus on just a couple things early on, but the things that are going to make the most substantial impact. And most of the time, this is building a product, building a brand, and building the distribution network, right? Like, if it's not those 3 things, it's not that it's not important, but it's not important the first 30, 60, 90 days you're building a company, you're building a business. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, because again, that's what these new entrepreneurs, these new startups, these new business owners, people who are thinking about getting into it, but for whatever reason, through fear or whatever, have prevented them from kind of stepping out and sort of starting. They want to know what are things going to look for them in the beginning. So I think that's very educational. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the other essential understandings that entrepreneurs, students need to have in terms of just the proper mindset? I mean, we talked about not allowing fear to have, to know that they can sort of get it done so that can help them through some of those daily challenges that they face, because they will.
Yeah, no, so you got to go all in. So I hear all the time in startup land, you learn from experience and fail quick. And those are actually right? I'm not going to dispute that. But again, going to the athlete analogy I gave you, you should also be reading every book under the sun that's going to help you grow. And I mean, read biographies and learn how those who have done what you want to do, how they operated, how they fought. Read books about stoicism and how people think 1,000 years ago and today, and how people tackled problems using their ego, using, their obstacles as a success story. Focus on like listening to podcasts like this, learning from real people who are doing it right now in the present day. Another aspect, which is going to sound weird at first when I explain it, so many entrepreneurs who we actually work with, they'll gain a lot of weight and they'll seem a lot more depressed at the end of a project in the beginning. And it's not because they hate us. No, they love us. It's because they decided to sacrifice health by like eating worse, because they thought they didn't have enough time to have a natural good meal, by sleeping less, by stop working out. And for that temporary output increase, they destroyed their long-term output increase. And again, I'm a preacher. So what I mean by this is I did that exact same mistake. I lost 60 pounds 3 years ago. I go to the gym almost daily, except for right now because I have a 9-week-old pup. Because right now it's a little scary to leave her alone, and she'll probably make everywhere. But once she's a little more potty trained, I'll go back every day again.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what's really interesting that you bring up this whole issue about health and about making sure that you're physically fit, because not only is it going to help you in terms of your energy, your stamina, being able to stay in the game, because, as you're an entrepreneur, as you're building a business, obviously you need a lot of hours, you need a lot of energy. But we talk about on the show about balancing that with their family and their life, and I guess that really gets into the life aspect of it, because, like you said, you said that you lost all that weight. I mean, it's so important, and yet, people are only focused on one thing and they're neglecting the other. And so, how did you create that balance for yourself? Because you're still a very young guy, but there's a lot of people who are, doing this and they're in their mid-career and they're deciding to sort of start a business, and yet they're afraid because they've got this family and, what if their health, what if they're not focusing on their health while they're putting in all these hours to start the business? So how are you able to sort of create this balance?
The answer is I schedule it. Like when I put in, I'm going to the gym on my calendar, my colleague JW, who runs my calendar for me, does not schedule over it. And I'm going for that time. If I schedule, which is right now on my calendar, puppy time, I'm not scheduling over it. If I dedicate time slots just to meetings, that's exactly being allocated for meetings. If I dedicate it just for work, it's going to be dedicated just to working on proposals, internal business stuff. So it's really, and it's like a no BS approach. It's just you schedule your calendar in blocks, and then you don't get out of those blocks for any reason. Someone scheduled a meeting with me when I had a dedicated to go to the gym or dedicated to work on a proposal or something internal. I'm not scheduling a meeting with them. I'm going to tell them I'm unavailable. You can't lose that self-constraint early on. And also it's kind of, again, we're talking about like emotional intelligence here. Telling someone, sorry, I can't do a meeting Monday at 3 o'clock, but I'm available Tuesday at 10 a.m. is not a negative. But for a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, they think because I told this person I can't do that Monday, but that Tuesday, they're going to lose that job. And because they lost that job, they're now a failure.
Sure. We have a funny story about how we were actually scheduling this podcast, this interview, and we went back and forth and we finally made it happen, because I actually interviewed a fella who is a fairly successful guy, with his own web content and web marketing company back on show 13, this Michael Templeton, and he swore by it, to use his Google Calendar. And, I'll tell you what, for several weeks after that, I was really using that thing, and, it's a matter of sticking to it and just having a system in place and, making sure that you're spending enough time in these other areas of your life, because for me at least, it also helps in business. And it sounds like you agree with that.
It was only it's not even a year yet that I brought JW on, who runs my calendar for me now. And it's one of my best moves, because a lot of my time is being ate up with people who would want to reschedule last minute, no call, no shows. I don't have time to send follow-ups to confirm meetings. It just became such a pain in the butt process. And look at my calendar, as again, I screenshotted my calendar to people before. I'm sorry about that. I'm getting a dog emergency issue.
No, hey, listen. They're part of our family. I've got 2 little dogs here, and I can really appreciate that very much. So you were saying about the calendar being extremely important and making sure that you stick to it, because if not, that could really be a suck of your time.
Yeah, and what I did with him doing it is not only does he follow up, not only does he confirm, what happens is he pretty much also makes sure that my calendar is the most efficient and focuses on those details. So my calendar ends up becoming more optimized. I have less no-call, no-shows. I have less reschedulations. My time slots to a T, and here's the cool little psyche aspect of it. People are less likely to cancel on you when you have someone else running your calendar than with you directly. They feel like, oh God, if someone else is running his calendar and they're dealing with 10, 12, 15 meetings a day and I cancel, when can I get back on? How's that going to happen?
Yeah. We talked about success a lot, and we talked about how, early on in your career, you were featured on, like things like MSNBC and NBC and Fox and AOL and CBS, and somehow how that can actually, go to your head. And of course now you're on the Listen Up show. So, So, how does somebody, I mean, and you're basically telling people that they don't necessarily focus on those things, yet it's kind of a catch-22 because if a new company actually gets featured on one of those shows, that can then actually help them get, recognition, and that could start to help them with their distribution channels and their sales. So how are you able to get featured on some of these outlets to sort of create that traction to begin with?
So my favorite strategy in the world is content. So, for example, this right here, me being on a podcast, is building exposure for me, right? And I'm giving you the content.
Sure.
So we write on our blog every single day, or just about, of great content that we're giving out for free. We share on social media incredible, motivating, and practical content that's going to help people. So to me, content is the easiest and most free distribution network. Content is like this huge, we're in this era where content can automatically put you in front of the eyeballs of people that used to pay millions and hundreds of thousands of dollars for it. For example, by just putting out free content, we've been featured on MSNBC, NBC, Fox, AOL, Huffington Post, Elite Daily, Mashable. I've been on countless podcasts. I mean, I've probably been on, this is probably, I'm guessing, my 250th podcast that I've been on to date.
And and when I went to your website, I didn't realize it at the time, but you actually have your own podcast.
Yeah, we have our own podcast, which again,
wow,
free content.
When I first approached you, I had no idea that you were actually doing that. So how did you get involved in that, and how's that been going?
So again, I mentioned being selfless to be selfish. It's actually one of my favorite sayings because it's really true.
Okay.
I wanted to pick the brains of incredible people. Podcast is a great way to convince them to hop on, and so you can pick their brain.
I
realized by me learning from them, that's great content that people are going to care about too. And to date, we've had on our podcast Andrew Brandt, who was the former CFO of the Packers for 10 years, an agent for Michael Jordan and Aaron Rodgers, founded MMQB and sold it for $500 million to ESPN. We had Tom Kuhn on the show, who was one of the founders of Google Drive, Google Calendar. We had Chris Pitts, one of the most powerful VC, female VCs to be precise, in Silicon Valley. We have Tucker Max on next week, who wrote the book, I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, had a movie based on his book, a couple New York Times bestsellers. Now he runs a company called Book in the Box. We had Kevin Cruz, 5 times New York Times bestseller, and founded 6 different Fortune 500 companies. Brad Aronson, who sold his company to Razorfish for over $1 billion. We had crazy people who've been on our show, and the coolest thing is we just spent 2 hours picking their brain and reverse engineering what made them tick, what were their stories, and then by just talking about their stories, you get a little bit of motivation, but a lot more practical advice that you can adapt to your own day-to-day life.
Is it the same natural way about you of basically going out and basically getting clients as it is for you to then get these guests to come onto your podcast? I mean, is it a system that you use? Is it more natural? Is it more intuitive? Is it more gut? What is your system?
Yeah,
what are your systems?
So I'm just very lucky that so it's twofold. One, I'm just very lucky that I am actually semi-sociable as a person. So
okay.
I get the luxury of meeting a lot of people and just remaining in contact. So a lot of people you see on the show are people I had the privilege of meeting before. And then the second thing I'll do is I'll ask those people who also have great networks. Do you know anyone who might be interested in this? It's a great way to tap into their network and reach people out from there as well. So it's really, that's it. There's nothing fancy, nothing scientific about it. And then probably my third thing that's just adding one here is that it's my natural desire if I just question everything, and people are very attracted to people who question things and try to reverse engineer and understand how things, why things, what makes things tick. So
you're a very curious person. I mean, obviously that's my natural inclination as well. And, it's interesting because, you mentioned about emotional intelligence. You mentioned about this upcoming blog. I mean, I'm going to link to all these things. So, just as a natural progression to any relationship, whether you're coming onto a podcast or whether you're inviting your own guests on, it just keeps on evolving, correct? I mean, would you say that it almost takes on a life of itself?
So, in the book that I'm working on right now, that's going to be released next year, I kind of describe myself as, even though by definition I'm an entrepreneur, I mentioned at the beginning, it's hard for me to call that because I've been doing this before I even knew there was a word to it.
Yeah.
What I actually more or less consider myself is a student of entrepreneurship. I'm just someone who's always trying to learn how to be better. And probably the best story I can give you is, are you familiar with the 80s rock band Metallica by any chance?
Oh yeah, I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, so,
not like Anthrax, but hey, I mean, they're all right.
They're all right. So I can't tell you the name of the drummer offhand, which is going to bug me. But they had an original drummer who got kicked out of the band the day that they signed a record label to release their first album, which at the time, you got signed with a record label, you're almost guaranteed to be commercially successful. And they brought in a new drummer who was a talented young guy, and most people would say to themselves, holy crap, I made it. This guy just thought to himself, holy crap, if I'm going to be in this limelight, I need to be the best that I can be. And he really put his ego to the side and picked the brains of the best drummers at the time, hired a drumming instructor to push him even further, and someone who had a completely different style to him. Like a much more, they're more like, metal and rock, right? Like someone that was classical drumming to show him different perspectives of how drumming can work. And that created that unique style that Metallica came today because he didn't settle. Just because he made it to that level didn't mean that he was going to be there. He wanted to become one of the best drummers of all time, and I'm probably doing him a disservice by not being able to think of his name offhand. But it's a real story, and to me,
we'll definitely come up with it. When I finally have it all looked up, I'll definitely put the link in there to it because it's an awesome story. I mean, and that's what motivates people. People like to hear other success stories. It motivates them. It inspires them.
And this is where I go back to why I'm a student of entrepreneurship is I have this belief that today is the dumbest I'll ever be. So every day is the dumbest you'll ever be. So this way, at the end of the night, you're a little bit better than you were that morning up, the day before, right?
Yeah.
And if you have that outlook, and that's the way you're learning and trying to approach yourself, imagine where you'll be in 20, 30, 50 years from now. It's the same thing as like investing in a mutual fund. You put $5 a day in there, I'm probably not going to seem very significant. You do that for 30, 40 years, it's going to be quite a bit in there, right?
You got that right.
It's literally the same thing. And that's the way you approach it.
Yeah. I was just telling my 16-year-old who has her own business, I said, if you start when you're 16 years of age and you put money in that retirement account, by the time you're whatever, you're going to have X number of dollars just by starting 1 or 2 or 3 years earlier. So if you start at 16 before you're 21, those extra 3, 4, 5 years is absolutely incredible in terms of the compounding of your assets and your money. So it's the same concept. We've been talking about success, and one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways to measure that is, in terms of revenue, in terms of sales. Can you talk to us a little bit about the number of clients that you have and, the type of revenue and net profit margins that you're earning, just to kind of give the audience an idea as to where you were at 16 and where you are now at 23, and to just allow them to know that it's possible. Sometimes people just need to know that.
Yeah, so for perspective, we're now, I think just last week, we signed our 181st customer, or 181st client, and they're all around the world. And kind of for context, what we're talking about, when we started, our average project size was about $5,000. Right now, our average contract size is about $100,000. We're averaging right now, probably bringing in about, I'd say, between 10 to 12 projects per quarter. And as I mentioned earlier, we have over 800 people reach out to us a year. At least that's what it's been averaging out to be for this year and last year combined. So it's pretty extraordinary there. So revenue, the way we work is unique, is we're set rate. So if we have, let's say, a $100,000 customer who has or let's say a 9-month project with us, we'll break that down to 10 payments. So therefore, every month they're paying $10,000 for that given work. So if we have 12, 13, 14 active clients at a time, and, you can start doing the math, how much revenue is coming in based upon that. Basically, $100,000 is our average. Our entry level, we don't take on projects under $50,000.
Okay.
So the only exception to the rule is we introduced this past year non-functioning prototypes, which are awesome. It's lower the cost of entry to $15,000, but that's for non-functioning prototypes. So fully functioning, you won't see us go under $50,000.
One of the most important questions that I have is something that our last guest actually brought up to me on my last podcast, and I wanted to ask you about it as a web developer. First, we want to kind of pick your brain here in terms of how do you take those ideas, those concepts, and build them out for the clients. I mean, we have clients that are doing crowdfunding and they're going through Kickstarter. I have one right now. He has Flip Wallet, and it just went live the other day, and we're really excited for him. How do you, for products, using Kickstarter, using Indiegogo is good, but, how does the person just starting out validate, their digital products, their apps, in an economical way just to kind of get started? And we kind of joke with one another that there's really not a economical way like Kickstarter or Indiegogo is for products. So what do you do? How do you help the clients build these ideas out? What do you tell somebody early on who has an app idea who wants to sort of build it up and get that validation before they start putting that 10 or 15 or 20 or in your case $50,000 into it?
Number one, I'll tell them to buy this book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, because it teaches the fundamentals on how do you, without investing a ton, validate an idea. And the Lean Startup methodology is something that I truly do believe in. So, to me, that's number one. And two, how do you go about building it is the MVP approach. You introduce a minimal viable product, which is the minimal amount of features needed to validate the idea. And the issue is most people think they're building MVP, but they had a lot of not fluff, but features not needed for day one. And now they'll spend significantly more than they had to. It'll take longer to get up, and they lost time that they could have been building revenue prior. And odds are they lost time where they could have been generating more traction quickly prior. And again, we'll go back to that compound interest thing rule. It's the same thing here. Like, that's time you lost that you can't get back. So you kind of have to find your baseline assumption as a product, and that's what you need to build upon. And before that, if you read the Lean Startup, it's going to teach you philosophies and concepts on what you can do in order to make sure you feel statistically you have the best chance to succeed with your idea before even putting your money where your mouth is.
Before we jump into Fast Pitch, we talked a little bit about books and education and obviously entrepreneurial studies. And we've interviewed people from Drexel University to the University of Delaware. And so we're really big on education and resources, even at my website, mitchellchadro.com, where, I'm always constantly providing startups and entrepreneurs with that. What are some, and I know that you have a blog, and so, certainly we're going to link to that, and your book is coming out where we hope to be able to have you back on, when that book comes out, sometime next year. But talk to us about some other educational resources that are available to startups and entrepreneurs, because I think that's really critical in addition to some of the things that we've already talked about.
So it's interesting. I'm very unorthodox here. So there's no real source that I go to and say, here's how to learn how to become an entrepreneur. In fact, a lot of times I get frustrated reading some of the articles on Entrepreneur and Inc. and Fast Company because they're more like motivational pieces and practicality pieces. So for me, instead, I'm going to just recommend a couple books that I think is a great start. So first one, I love biographies, and I'll read biographies on those who I look up to in life, that I feel I want to take a piece out of. So for perspective, just the biographies I've read this year alone, I've read the Walt Disney biography, the Steve Jobs biography, the Bruce Springsteen biography that just came out, the Albert Einstein biography, the Benjamin Franklin biography. And if you notice, there's no direct correlation there. Yes, some are entrepreneurs, they're all different time periods, all different type of people, but I want to learn from the very best at anything, not just entrepreneurship. I want to broaden my own perspective. Then other books, two by Ryan Holiday. I always recommend everyone. Ego is the enemy and the obstacle is the way. Another one by Peter Thiel. I might disagree sometimes with some of the things that come out of his mouth, but his book is amazing. Is 0 to 1. A great book. Probably one of the classics. Yeah.
Yeah, no. You were going to mention one of those classics before I jump in. So tell us that classic.
Yep. One of the classics is definitely The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
Every entrepreneur should read. And the only other one that I would recommend too, by Ben Horowitz, is The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which I think is another great. Oh, and one more. I told you there's plenty of books. Rework by Jason Fried. That's all. These are just amazing assets that
well,
I think, and if you read any of them, you're going to be set for success.
Well, I'll tell you that was a really awesome segue into our next and final lightning round because, it sounds like you love books as much as I do, which is really, really cool because, it's sponsored by MitchellChadro.com/books. I mean, it sounds like you love books like I do, and obviously from biographies to business books to philosophy to emotional intelligence, and sounds like you keep yourself busy. If people actually go over to MitchellChadro.com/books, they can actually start their 30-day trial and get a 1 free download. You mentioned quite a number of them, and you'll be able to get your first 30-day trial for free. So I mean that's pretty good. So now we're gonna jump into some of these questions. We've covered some of them already, but let me ask you the first lightning round question. The best business advice that you actually would put right up there on a billboard.
Never get too high and never get too low.
We already know what the Audible inspirational book is, which of course was already brought to you by MitchellChadro.com/Audible. I mean, you mentioned a ton of books that we're going to all have links to. You can mention a client if you'd like, but the next question is, and you've already mentioned a lot of them, people that you've interviewed, Google Drive, we've mentioned calendaring and things like that, but an app that you use, whether in business or family or life, that you can recommend to us.
That's a good one. I'm going to say Slack. Hands down.
Okay.
Communication tool that we use as a company.
Yeah, okay. We've had a number of people recommend that. You've already mentioned one of your favorites, but maybe you could just jump in there with another one, a quote or a mantra that you use to actually inspire or motivate. Maybe it should actually be to be practical because I noticed what you said before. It's not necessarily about inspiring or motivating, but maybe just as a practical quote or a practical mantra that you use.
Trust the process. Nick Saban. I mean, obviously it's been the same long before, but Nick Saban, you understand the definition of trust the process, which is you don't look at the end result. You break it down to such simple steps that even if that one step is so easy to do that it makes something complex seem easy. So look up Nick Saban's Trust the Process and how Nick Saban operates and teaches his players, then, he might be a terrible NFL coach, but there's a reason why he's been so successful in college. And I think that process is a process you can adopt in anything that you do, especially entrepreneurship.
Yeah, you've really dropped a lot of value bombs here with a lot of these books. We're going to have links to all of them. So thanks so much, Joshua. Hey, can you tell us a purchase less than $100 that has actually impacted your life the most?
It's probably very early, but I'm going to say probably right now it's the English Bulldog I brought home.
Well, you want to hear the funniest thing? True story. My Daisy girl that we just got about a year ago. All kidding aside, she was $10, and she's like priceless. So the point of the question is that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a whole lot, and that's really the reason for the question. I really wish you the best with the doll. That's really cool. So under $100. Wow, that's great. About a fun fact about you that maybe not a lot of people know about, but it'll tell us something about you personally.
A fun fact that not a lot of people know about me. Well, everyone knows I'm a diehard sports fan, so that doesn't count. So let's see. I'm trying to think of one. What's a good fun fact? I've skydived 7 times in my life.
Wow, that's awesome. I gave it some thought when I was going to law school, but I never did it, and I wish I would have back then. So stay tuned. I might decide to do it. One of the fun.
Actually, I have one more too. It's a fun fact of what's about to happen. I'm getting my first tattoo on my left shoulder, designed by an artist who I'm personally friends with, to reflect this point in my life, to always motivate me. So another interesting fun fact that I haven't been very vocal about.
Yeah, I
haven't got it yet, but probably in January. I finally got the finalized concept of what it looks like. So, but it's cool. So it's awesome.
That's really cool. It's interesting since you came up with the second one. I was actually going to jump in with one that I thought I found about you, and I just wanted to quickly ask you. I hear that you have over 699,000 Twitter followers and 200,000 people that you follow. Like, how do you get to that point? I mean, that's probably not a lightning round question, but how did you do that?
The compound interest.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Compound interest. That's a lot of interest.
I mean, that is, I was in Twitter right around the time that Twitter started becoming mainstream. So I didn't get in there after it became mainstream.
Okay.
So when I joined Twitter incredibly early, it was not saturated. And I was able to get one of the more popular accounts incredibly early in its heyday.
Yeah.
So when you have a popular account early on something that goes big, all of a sudden you're an account that's under recommended follow when you sign up and what people start referencing to.
Well,
and I actually contributed a lot to Twitter to the success of my career so far.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're gonna have an extra one. I'm gonna add you to my Twitter. So that's really cool. Hey, how about the worst? Yeah, right. How about the worst advice being given to young entrepreneurs today? You might have alluded to a few of them, but I think that would be helpful. The worst advice being given to you.
It's easy. It's follow your passion. To me, it's about finding your purpose, because passion's something that disappears, like being motivated. Purpose is something that stays forever.
Okay.
Nobody talks about what's your purpose, what is actually your drive. They just talk about what are you passionate about. Now, passion can help you find purpose. So to me, passion is more of a resource versus an asset. And I think society has screwed up what the word passion actually means.
Yeah. I think people are going to get a lot out of this because you're very deep in an awesome way. And, I like the way you think, and it's really given me a whole lot to think about too, passion versus purpose versus, being practical versus, motivation versus inspiration. I mean, what's more important? So no, that's all great stuff. When you think of and you might have mentioned this already, but when you think of the word successful, what first name comes to mind? I know you've read a lot of these biographies, so that may or may not necessarily be one, but what name comes to mind?
Benjamin Franklin is to me my personal idol. So
yeah, terrific.
Whenever I think of it, I think he is literally the definition of what a success story is.
Sure. Hey, what one thing contributes most to your success?
I'm going to say perseverance.
And, we talk somewhat about some systems in our life, but what one main process or system in business, family, or life do you use that has helped you the most?
It's really easy. Listen to your natural body. When your body's naturally just tired or feeling burned out, listen to it. If you're feeling excited about something, identify where that source is. I feel a lot of people are disconnected from themselves a little bit. And again, I talked about this on the blog before, and I'm very vocal about it. I purposely go to therapy so I can really go and try to deep into my head and understand more about what makes myself tick. And I use it not because I'm depressed or anything like that, but similar to why I go to the gym, I want to work out my mind. It's a great asset there. So I feel people need to spend a little bit more time in a mental zone and try to understand what more about them makes them tick and what drives them and what they need to fine tune. Most people don't even spend a fraction of a moment doing that, and it doesn't matter what you do. I think it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, no, that's great. That really helps people with the balance in business and family and life, and that's why I asked that question. Hey, looking back on all that you've done, and again, you're young, you're 23, you started in this business at 16, but looking back on all you've done in business, family, and life, are you happy? Do you have any regrets?
I am. So it's interesting. I'm not happy every day, but I'm fulfilled. To me, being fulfilled is more important than being happy. But when you're fulfilled, you're more likely to be happy than not. So at the moment, of course, I'm happy. Of course, I can get an email that might tick me off a little bit, right?
Sure.
But I'm fulfilled. So fulfillment to me is what is everything. And, because I'm fulfilled, that's why I have that drive, that purpose, that passion. So to me, if I was giving you, I would ask, are you fulfilled? Because I think fulfillment is something most people in life do not have.
That's great. Before we wrap up here, we're going to certainly ask how everybody can obviously stay in contact with you, and then we're going to wrap up at the end. So Joshua, how's everybody going to stay in contact with you? Because this has been really awesome, and we're certainly going to link to everything that we've been talking about tonight.
Our website, chopdawg.com, dog spelled D-A-W-G. The best site to get to me there. As for me personally, all my social networks are under the username Joshua. It's like Boot, but take out the word boot and put in Joshua. Except Snapchat is just my full name, Joshua Davidson, because some a-hole took the name Joshua before I registered. And yeah, that's how you can reach me.
Let's listen up to Joshua as he summarizes his 3 main points, his takeaways that he wants to not inspire, not motivate, but to just be practical. So Joshua, number 1.
Persistency, consistency, and fortitude. That's really 3 easy things right there, but to everything you do, you should apply all three of those things.
Joshua,
Yep.
we want to say this has been awesome. We really want to thank you so very much. Until next time. Thanks again. Hey, take care.
Thanks, man.